Obviously, recruiting during the season, we don't talk about it quite as much, Jordan, because we got games and all sorts of other stuff to talk about. But it bleeds into the season ever so often. And this past week, Dre Quinn, four-star edge rusher, out decommitted from the Tigers. There was kind of a story that came out before this happened. He went on a visit to Tennessee and watched their game. And then, as everybody knows, I'm sure everybody in here knows that Clemson, Dabo Sweeney has a policy that if you are committed to Clemson, you cannot take visits to any other school. So obviously, Clemson had a problem with that. Obviously, he wants to um, shop around a little bit, go to some other teams. In order for him to do that, he needs to decommit from the Tigers, and that happened this past week. So, Jordan, your thoughts on the decommitment of Dre Quinn, what it means to this upcoming class, and what it means for the future of the Clemson Tigers?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be one to sugarcoat it. There's some times where, you lose a kid and you're like, okay, well, this is a guy that, a lot of times there are indications, there are signs, and there's obviously, some situations where you're like, okay, this take is probably not going to stick. And I don't think Clemson is going to be upset that it doesn't stick, but this is not one of them. I don't think this is I think this is a pretty big loss for the recruiting class. I mean, when you consider what the emphasis was this cycle at making sure at restocking at defensive line, considering everything you have leaving after this season, I mean, it was important to really hit the ball out of the park with this group. And missing on Bryce Perry Wright was obviously the big backbreaker in a lot of ways. But the win, the recruiting win, landing Dre Quinn out of Beaufort, Georgia over Texas, that was a very big statement at the time. And this is kind of the thing that you open yourself up to when you're 1-3. I mean, would he have still shopped around if Clemson was 4-0? Possibly. That's just the reality of recruiting nowadays. But it certainly didn't help. And this is something that you kind of have to expect. I did say that I think a couple weeks ago I didn't expect any sort of like mass exodus from this class, but I didn't say there wouldn't be any guys that decommitted. And I definitely think that I don't think he's going to be the only one, but I don't expect the entire class to fall apart. So we'll see how they kind of respond. It's going to be tough. I mean, you got, starting by winning football games would be a big deal. But, I also think that, this is another reason why it's really just time to truly embrace the portal at this point. And no more, because no more. I mean, taking 3 guys last cycle, that was a massive step in the right direction. And I don't want to be a revisionist history about it, because I think they had reason to believe that they only needed those guys and they would be okay everywhere else. But obviously, the results on the field have shown that not to be the case. And so now you gotta reevaluate your strategy. And now that that you're missing out on some big time recruits that could potentially come in and help you next cycle, it makes it even more important that you go into the portal to address some needs. It is what it is. I've always said and always maintained I don't need Clemson to go in and take 20 to 25 kids from the portal and be a team that's like constantly just overhauling their roster. But you do need to evaluate your positions every single year and try to upgrade them when possible. If there is a guy you can go get that you feel confident will make this room better, go get him.
Yeah.
And that also means changing kind of how you're changing your retention strategy. Does that mean you lose a couple more kids? I think that's something that you have to be okay with. Guys that are, that have been in the program but don't really have a path to playing time. They've graduated. There's quite a few guys like that on this team that, if they had, been, if they had gone elsewhere, you would have spots to fill with someone that might actually be able to come in and provide at least some depth, if not start for you. So, I think that's that's the model you have to live with, and that doesn't mean you compromise caring about graduation. I get that, but you got to be willing to let some of these guys walk a little bit more than they were. And I think you're seeing kind of the result of that. And so Dre Quinn, massive loss. I hate it because he used a clip from our show in his commitment video, so it hurts even a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I think that this is the reality of recruiting, and when you start out 1-3, this is the result that happens. When Florida State started out the way they started out last season, they lost kids too. It happens to when you lose games, it's very easy to negatively recruit. Some teams are better at holding on to a class than others. And I think Clemson, isn't going to, like I said, I don't think Clemson's class is going to collapse, but I don't think Dre Quinn is going to be the only defection. And that's something you're just going to have to live with.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. This is, it's unfortunate that this hurts for this class. And it's at a position of need. The defensive end group is not the deepest, and you expect that you're going to lose multiple guys out of that room. I think 3 this year, right? We expect to lose 3 out of that room this year off of the team, and that's not counting if anybody decides to transfer. So Will Helt's going to be gone, TJ Parker's going to be gone, and Cade Denhoff's going to be gone after this season. So that's 3 guys out of that room that you will no longer have.
Does Zaire Patterson have another year? Because I guess he would be gone too.
I think Zaire too. So maybe it's 4.
Yeah.
Because wasn't him and Denhoff in the same?
They were the same recruiting class. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, they'll both be gone after this year. They both are out of eligibility. Yeah. It's tough. It's a tough break, right? And I think it further cements the path that Clemson is going to have to start relying far more on the portal than they have in the past. You got to go fill these gaps with portal guys, because you're not bringing them in at the same clip that you did before in this new world of recruiting. And there's a lot of reasons for that, right? Part of it is that Clemson has kind of fallen off and fell a few rungs down the ladder a little bit as far as on the field production. So that's part of it. The other part of it is obviously the NIL and the money piece. There's just schools out there willing to pay high school recruits more than Clemson's willing to pay them, or can pay them more than Clemson can pay them. Everybody's NIL is not the same. So I think that's part of it as well. You got agents in this thing now, so they're going to want to try to convince their clients to go shop around and try to find the best deal, because obviously the agent wants the best deal for the player. When I say best deal, I mean most money, because that's how they're getting paid. So, there's a lot that goes into this now. Decommitments are going to become a norm, which is not something Clemson's been used to. But in this new age of recruiting, it's going to become the norm. Guys are going to decommit. Guys are going to transfer. Guys are going to leave. This is just the new world of college football that we live in. It's unfortunate. It's not a good thing that we lost his commitment and he's going to end up going elsewhere. But I just think Dabo and the rest of the staff is going to have to do a really good job of evaluating the portal this offseason and bringing in the right pieces. Much like you did Will Helt this year. He's been fantastic. He's been the best defensive lineman by far so far this year.
Yeah, exactly.
So you hit great on that. So you're going to have to continue that. You're going to have to bring in, that edge position for sure. And that's just one of the positions of need that you're going to have to go in there. You might have to go in at safety as well, maybe linebacker. You're going to have to look at several positions on that defense when it comes to the transfer portal window.
Yeah, exactly. And, that's the reality. And Will Helt is a great example. He's come in and, even through the 1-3 start, he's been, he's played harder than the guys that you expected to be your superstars, largely. If it says anything, it tells you that, this, the portal isn't the demon, the boogeyman that, maybe some people in the fan base have been, led to believe because of because of the rhetoric from Dabo, and I think some of it has been overblown in terms of how the fan has the fan has received it versus what Dabo actually means. But at the same, that is the kind of messaging that you kind of put out there, and so the reality is the portal is a great tool, and you got to use it. Everybody else is, and you're handcuffing yourself. So that's where we are now.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where we're at. So we'll see. I think this offseason is going to tell Clemson fans a lot about what Dabo Swinney is willing to do when it comes to the portal, because there are going to be lots of holes on this roster that are going to need to be filled, whether that's depth pieces or whether that's guys that you need to go out there and start or play significant snaps. There's going to be quite a few, problem areas to fill on this roster come springtime.
Indeed, and we'll see kind of how they address it, because I'm as intrigued as anybody, because this is going to be an offseason that's going to look nothing like anything we've seen at Clemson so far in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. All right, Jordan. The bye week is over, and it's about time for us to watch this Clemson Tiger team trot out onto the field and play another football game. I know maybe that doesn't excite some Clemson fans out there. I'm not going to lie. It was nice to have an off week. It was nice to have a bye week last week. We just sat there and enjoyed some great football games, by the way. Last weekend had some crazy good football games.
Bangers, man.
Started with Friday night and rolling all the way through Saturday to those night games. I mean, that Oregon game came down to the wire. Obviously the Alabama-Georgia game was a great game as well. So lots of good matchups last week. But it's time to talk about our Tigers on the field once again. As I mentioned, they were off last week, had a bye week. Sounds like they did some work on the field during their bye week, which is, maybe a little bit outside the norm for what Dabo Swinney usually does. But when you start 1-3, you got to change some things up, right? And you got to do things a bit differently. But heading into this North Carolina matchup, obviously in the offseason, Jordan, all the talk was about Dabo Swinney, Bill Belichick, Super Bowl winning coach, one of the greatest, if not the greatest NFL coach of all time, right? With all the, what does he have? 6, 7 Super Bowls, how many ever he has? A ton. And that was kind of the storyline in the offseason, right? That was buzz around ACC media days. And, let's just be frank. It has not started well for Bill Belichick or the North Carolina Tar Heels. They are not having a great football season so far. Like, as I mentioned, they've played 2 Power 5 opponents. They've lost to both of them. They had a struggle win against Charlotte earlier in the season. They did kind of, have, a little bit of a showing against, another group of 5 team there. But again, they've not had the offensive production at all. Their defense has not been good either. They're not great at stopping really anything. And they're not good at putting up a bunch of yards and points. I think they have like 600 passing yards total on the season through 4 games, and 450 rushing yards through 4 games. So not an explosive offense by any means, not an offense that puts up a ton of points. Obviously, everything is new there. They brought in a ton of transfers. Everything is kind of still in its feeling out period for UNC. So with that said, Jordan, what do you think about Clemson rolling into this game? Will this be a quote-unquote get-right game for the Tigers? And if it's not, then I guess they're just never going to get right this season, because this North Carolina team, no disrespect to them, they're right for the picking, right? If you can't put up a productive day on offense and defense against this team, you're probably not making a bowl game. Just
Yeah.
keeping it real. This is not a good football team. I think they got some good pieces there, but it's just not coming together for them. But with that said, our Tigers have not played well to this point in the season either. So we can't really talk too much or puff our chest out too much about playing this North Carolina team. But Jordan, just kind of your overarching thoughts on the matchup and how you're feeling heading into Saturday's noon kick.
Well, I don't know, man. I mean, they got ludicrous as our North Carolina channel. Shout out to the guys over there; they do great work. They say Kenan Stadium is about to be rocking. Hey, I believe it. That's one thing that has been impressive. Even through the rough start is the show out. As a North Carolina native, I've been to some pretty pitiful. I've been to Kenan Stadium a few times. There've been some pretty pitiful crowds, but this year, there's definitely been a rejuvenation in the fan base. So, but yeah, I mean, this matchup overall, I do think there are a lot of things that are in Clemson's favor. Obviously, I think a lot of what North Carolina has this season is new. They, I think offensively, I think they have a couple of nice pieces, but just collectively that offensive line is not, coming together. And at quarterback, they're extremely limited. Both options really. Gio Lopez, who is questionable for this game, he's suffered an injury their past game against UCF, and then Max Johnson is a guy that's just dealt with injuries his entire life, unfortunately, and. I think they have like I said, I think they have a couple of nice pieces. I think Jordan Shipp has a really bright future as a receiver, but there's just, I don't know, offensively, there's not really a whole lot they do very well. And I think a lot of it has to, some of it has to do with some of the injuries they've had. Austin Blasky, a guy that Clemson actually looked at coming out of the portal. He has been their best offensive lineman. He's been hurt for a while. So that doesn't help. Especially at a position like center. So I do think that this is one thing, this is a team that has some, I can see getting better over the course of the season. But I don't think they have a whole lot for you. The problem is we felt that way. We felt that way at other points this season. And, this Clemson team still struggled. And that's the thing. What does it look like coming out of a bye week? What changes do they make? I think the biggest challenge for Clemson in this game, I think North Carolina's defense has probably been a little bit better than they've probably shown statistically. I think offensively they just have been just pretty unproductive, and that's certainly hurt. I don't think their defense is great by any means, but I think they have some pieces that have played better than the stats will show, and I think I can see what they're doing there. Steve Belichick is their defensive coordinator. I think they have a pretty nice scheme, and I think they run to the football. They're just not overly talented. I think that's really kind of been their biggest hurdle that they've had to deal with. But they have some guys, with the transfers and all of that, they have some pieces that I think could develop nicely. So we'll see. But this weekend, I think that this should be an opportunity where you got to be able to put up consistent drives on offense. I don't even mean explosive. Like at this point, I'm not even asking for explosive offense. I'm just asking for put a 7, 8, 9 play drive together and score and finish in the red zone. That's been the most frustrating thing with this team. And they haven't done that to this point so far. So like I said, I think you got to weather the storm. I mean, I definitely think Keenan Memorial will have a pretty nice crowd. As bad as Clemson has been this season, they're still Clemson, and so that matters. I think a ton in terms of the draw for this team. For this matchup. But with the limitations that I think North Carolina has offensively, you got to put drives together on offense, and keep that defense on the field. And I think you should be okay, but that doesn't. Again, We felt that way about other games this season, and it's gone pretty poorly. So don't really know what to expect.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to know what you're going to get out of this Clemson Tiger team right now.